All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Wendy. How's it
Great.
going?
How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here. Shall we get started?
I think we should.
Let's do it. Erin, you want to kick off the
Sure,
intros?
yeah. So I'm Erin Joy Nash. I'm a visual storyteller, filmmaker, photographer, and writer. I live in Leavenworth, Washington, on the ancestral lands of the Pasquosa or Wenatchee people. And my work focuses mostly on, or my work and my life, I want it to focus on intentional and compassionate living and elevating and amplifying underrepresented communities around issues of intersectional feminism, anti-racism, and environmental justice. And in Leavenworth here, I love to backpack or do anything outdoors with my two dogs. And a skill that I'm learning recently is how to cultivate a garden. I've really been loving that lately.
Yes, and like Erin, I guess I should say my name. My name's Chelsea Murphy. I use she, her pronouns. Like Erin, I live on the ancestral lands of the Wenatchee peoples as well. You might know that as Leavenworth, Washington. It's a cute little small town nestled in the heart of north central Washington, and it has a really fun and quirky Bavarian theme. So you might have visited here once or twice, but that's where I live. And so I am currently just advocating for change in the outdoors around diversity and equity and inclusion, working directly with brands, small organizations, and different people just trying to create space for more people who look like me. I'm also really amped up about getting Black moms into the outdoors just through representation and encouragement and just, leaving tips and hints along the way on my social media platform. It's called She Colors Nature. And so I am definitely more of a freelance writer, speaker, just about anything right now as far as just doing storytelling, getting my story out there, and again, creating space for other stories as well. And I am also working with these wonderful ladies on a really awesome film project that we'll get to a little bit later. But my first little toe dip into just being a co-producer and learning this filmmaking world and how it runs and how it has ran and how we want to change things around that as well. I have two daughters at home, 8 and 4, and we are just in love with nature and getting outside, loving to hike, and actually mountain biking is what we're doing a lot right now. So just trying to get them comfortable on wheels so that we can get into nature and enjoy our beautiful Wenatchee land as much as possible. So that is a little bit about me. Sanj.
Snaps for the wheels. Also, I love how you're like, I'm just, out here working on all this representation stuff. I'm just decolonizing the outdoors in front of and behind the lens. Not a big deal. That's just my work. My name is Sanjana. I'm a filmmaker and a climate action communicator. So a lot of my work focuses specifically on climate action, regeneration, ancestral wisdom, how to sort of bring an ancestral ethos into the work that I do as in terms of approach and also in terms of the themes on screen. And a lot of that comes from, I have a background in Ayurveda, which is the Indian system of healing and wellness, South Asian ancestral system of healing and wellness. And I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently calling in from the land of the Chumash, Dongba, and Kizh, and which is now known as Los Angeles. So it's hot and sunny, lots of palm trees. A skill, to use Erin's little fun fact, a skill that I've been learning recently or relearning recently is how to match my shirts and my pants again, because I forgot how to go out in public during COVID in anything other than leggings or athleisure. So now that I'm in LA, I have to look at my closet and pick a pair of pants and figure out how to put something on top that matches. So that has been quite a journey. And I thank you all in advance for your support. Wendy, if you want to introduce yourself, we'd love to hear a bit from you, but also no pressure. But yeah, if you wanted to, that'd be great.
I'll just come off mic long enough to say hello. I'm so happy to be in even a even a virtual community with the three of you again today. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say. I'll grab the skill thing though. One skill I've had to relearn. We just moved back into our house after a month's long absence during some renovations. And I picked up a stool that my grandfather had built and my grandmother had covered. And I sanded and repainted it using skills my father taught me and recovered it using skills that my mother taught me. So it was a multi-generational little tiny step stool. And it was just really sweet to pick up those skills again.
All right. That is super awesome. Good for you. I need to learn how to do some stuff like that. So I will give us a team intro as well for anyone who might be watching this now or later to get to know us as collaborators. Collectively, we are the Brave Space Project. We're a multiracial, women-led, radically collaborative creative team seeking to decolonize outdoor culture, both in front of and behind the lens. We believe that a brave space is the foundation designed to empower you to tell your story and to create an equitable, inclusive outdoor culture that we would all want to be a part of. So in this hopefully discussion-based workshop, we'll explore what a brave space is and how it can help create belonging in the outdoors for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Chelsea, I will kick it to you to chat a bit about how the session's gonna go.
Let's see. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, so like Sanj mentioned, we are really working to push for a collaborative session. And I know, like, based off of numbers or maybe just the small group, I'm actually really excited to have just a really small and intimate group. I think for the purpose of what we're working towards, I think it's actually kind of in our favor. So us behind the scenes, we are not here as experts, right, or teachers, but rather just facilitators on this session. So you won't hear a lot of like how to do this or these easy steps, but more of like questions and explorations and the like. So we're really excited to share our experiences in the hopes that they'll be useful to you, Wendy, and whoever else gets to hear this little clip. But we're also very excited to learn from you all and your journeys. And so we're excited to be in community with you. So without further ado, we would like to share a little bit about our project, Expedition Reclamation.
Yeah.
Erin, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and I would also say, I don't know if Siobhan or Brandy, you're welcome to chime in as well in our discussions. We'd love to hear from you as well. You're welcome. But yeah, so Expedition Reclamation. So I think we have been working on this project now for 1.5 years, which is crazy to say. It's coming on 2 years. But our short film documentary, Expedition Reclamation, is seeking to redefine outdoorsy and reclaim belonging in outdoors for Black, Indigenous, and women of color by highlighting their joyful, resilient, and transformative relationship to outdoor recreation. And we're going to share with you our trailer right now.
They ask, "What are you?" Trying to make sense of our hues. As our chocolate brown fingers braid raven black hair in salute to the spirits of our grandmothers. They ask, "Why are you here?" As we step into the radiance of the woods, the waterfalls, waves, and peace. In play, in pilgrimage, over challenge we thrive. Our healing mends roots of the earth. Beyond their expectations, beyond their line of sight. Onward to our own horizons. in nature, we claim our belonging.
I just realized that still says coming summer 2021. You got to wait a little bit longer.
I was like, can I get it down from the screen before anyone sees it? Then
It's all good. All good things take time, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just things that we're learning. I love that. So just moving right along, me and Erin are going to talk about, a little bit about how this project came to be. And I think a lot of it is really interesting to kind of look back on. Like Erin said, we're about 1.5 years into this. And yeah, I guess this was right before the pandemic started at the end of 2019. Erin and I, just being activists in our own world, kind of collided together, right? And just like she found me understanding like the work that I was doing in my path, and then with being one of the only women filmmakers in the Valley, I think it was just kind of a natural progression that we came together to work on this really awesome project that had representation in the heart of it, both in front of the lens and behind the lens. And so with that little story, we like to say that it started with a really amazing beer. We just kind of got together and started brainstorming all of our, thoughts and just hopes and dreams for what we could see for an outdoor film in the future. I know with me, being outdoorsy is a lot more than just, the mountaineers or the super climbers or anything like that, which all of those things are really special. But for me, it's much more about just like having this really reciprocal relationship with the land and getting outdoors. And sometimes that could just look like, grabbing a water bottle and going and sitting out in the woods somewhere for a while, or backpacking, or just being with my kids on the trail and learning through their eyes. And so, our film was birthed through that amazing conversation of just like, what is an outdoors that we want to be a part of? How can we create a brave space with these women that we want to highlight? Erin, do you want to build on more of the technical things?
Yeah, well, and I think how it started too was you put a call out on your Instagram, just a call for characters and people to be in front of and behind the lens. I know we had so many conversations about how historically storytelling has really mostly been through a white lens, and how important it is for stories to be told by the communities that they are about, and for there to be more diversity behind the screen as well. And so when you put out that call for characters, I think 55 women responded, and we were overwhelmed in a really good way by that. And it quickly became apparent that this became more of a community. This was going to be a community. And then the film was going to be the byproduct of that community. And so that's really where this idea of a brave space kind of came from, because we had 55 women from all over the United States, some in Canada, from all different lived experiences, backgrounds, races. How were we going to create a space where we could create trust and have conversations about what an outdoors could look like, and then have a story that we could then share with the world that honored those women and what they were saying? So behind the scenes, it was really cool for me. I mean, this is the biggest project that I've ever worked on, and it was cool to kind of take the time to build relationships before we even stepped on set. We were having, because it was COVID, we were having Zoom calls, small groups and larger groups with these women, asking them questions about barriers that they had maybe encountered to getting into the outdoors, and what they wanted an outdoor culture to look like for themselves and for their children and future generations. And we really built on those conversations to come up with our interview questions. And the film ended up focusing on Washington women, partially because of COVID, partially because there were so many people. We knew there were so many beautiful stories, but we had to hone it in a little bit there. Sanj, you describe the title of the film really beautifully. And I wonder if you would share that, because that really ties into kind of what we landed on in terms of this project.
Totally. Yeah. Also, kind of building off of what you guys were saying, the call out that Chelsea had on her Instagram is how I found the project, and I badgered them with emails and came on board as a collaborator, which was just so beautiful. And I think one of the things, speaking of the title, that was really powerful for us was when we found this community of women who, in all the different places that they lived, had this experience of feeling like the only. We had a lot of reflection on how do we reflect that in the film? How do we build a title around this movement? And so one of the things we thought a lot about was this idea of an expedition, which is something that we see a lot in outdoor films. It's typically European white men, even historically speaking, that go out into foreign lands and historically have planted flags in the name of a European crown. And that's been for science, for exploration, for war, a lot of different goals. But it's always been, going to someone else's land and claiming it. And even in outdoor films today, that same sentiment is often reflected of seeing a typically all white male crew of athletes going to a different place and having their own set goals for what they want to climb or what stats they want to achieve. And like Chelsea mentioned, that stuff is all super powerful in many different ways, but we felt like something was missing with that. And so we reflected on this idea of an expedition, and we're thinking about, well, what happens if we reclaim that word and we make that entire word about reclamation itself? And so the title came, Expedition Reclamation, out of those conversations where we said, let's take back that term and let's make the expedition about going inwards and re-legitimizing BIPOC ways of being with nature. And the first part of that re-legitimization is to ourselves. We find this community, we realize we're not alone, we're not the only, we feel validated in the instinctive ways that we want to be outside. And so that is kind of where the title takes root, and from there grows to hopefully become a movement in even the mainstream of outdoor culture as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chelsea, did you have anything else to add about how we started out before we move on to what the brave space means?
Well, I think that this next portion is a really good lesson. And I think that ultimately, it was just really interesting going from, dreaming up this project to chatting with these 55 women, building community with them, and then, ultimately being forever connected through this project. The byproduct, the film hasn't even been released yet, and so it's just we're still, snowshoeing with them and getting outdoors with them and planning hikes and meditative retreats. And it's just this really profound thing that has happened just from, putting it out there, putting ourselves out there, and giving us the space to validate, I guess, other women's stories, which I think that a lot of the time we don't often get that opportunity. And so, I'm just really excited. I feel like we're still on this expedition, right? It's so true to the title. We're just currently on an expedition that is just forever in the making, and I love that part of it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And I remember when we first started talking, after we knew we had 55 women who wanted to be involved, Sanj came on, we had another gal, Rebecca, who came on as a co-producer, and we were like, okay, what the heck do we do with this now? We need to create a space that is trusting, like we said. And I know we talked about the phrase safe space, and realizing that that is the ultimate goal, but we can't always promise that things are going to feel safe with people from all different backgrounds. We are all learning, we are all growing, we are all involved in our own healing and our own journeys and learning how to tell our stories, there may be times where we say the wrong thing or we don't show up well in a team meeting. And so can we show up in a different way, in a way that is brave and vulnerable? And so we ultimately were like, how about a brave space? And then had to figure out, well, what the heck does that mean? And so we'd love to have a little bit of discussion around that with whoever's here, and also just for people who watch this later too. I mean, I think the questions that we asked ourselves were just, and asked our community, the larger community too. I remember we had a big group call and just asked, what do you think of when you hear brave space? And what would an atmosphere look like for you to be able to show up your most brave and your most vulnerable in your truest self? And just what does that look like? And so I don't know if Sandra, Chelsea, if you kind of want to share what you thought of initially when that was, if it was a new concept to you, or kind of share some of your thoughts around that. And we'd just love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I can hop in with some thoughts on that. I think it was definitely a new concept to me because this phrase safe space is so common, but brave space is something that you guys really coined. And so I think the first thing that struck me about that was it felt like it was asking a certain degree of engagement and a certain degree of relationship building and trust, like intentional trust building, that I've never really felt when I hear the term safe space, because the idea of a safe space feels a little bit more passive. And I think it is, like you said, it's a beautiful idea and I like it a lot, but how do we get to that safe space? Maybe is by doing something that is more active and by showing up in a way that's more, that is practicing that intentionality and acknowledging that some of the discomfort and some of the, I don't want to even call them mistakes, but some of the adjustments and the learnings are part of that process. And so I think one thing that's been super cool about this idea of a brave space is, and we've talked about this a bit, but it really only works, and it works best at least if everyone shows up with this assumption of best intentions, knowing that the people that are there with you, by the very fact that they've bought into this idea of a brave space, are coming there with their best intentions. And if we lead with that validation, we lead with saying, I might not agree, but I understand that your perspective comes from your lived experience. It might not be right for the project. It might not be what I believe, but my perspective also comes from my own lived experience. And so how can we slow down and have intentional conversation around that? And really, like you said, Erin, just show up for each other in a way that's really different, and doesn't really have a formula to it yet. So I just was very floored by the it's at once very simple and at once very revolutionary, that concept.
Yeah, and I love that, like the last thing that you just said about it being revolutionary, and the idea of a brave space being something that is, kind of groundbreaking, especially for women, and especially for women of color, and just wishing that it wasn't so revolutionary all at the same time, right? Wishing that it was just something that has always been, and like places and spaces were always just somewhere where we felt brave and where we felt we could be, have big emotions and have big thoughts, big feelings, and just have those be taken as something that is, just like everyone else. But I think that that's not the case. And so for that point, like it is revolutionary, and I think for me, a brave space, speaking to that second question of just like, what does the atmosphere look like? That is brave, and in turn makes it really safe, right? For me to show up authentically, for me to like speak my things and my jargon. I think that ultimately, like, it is a place that's super intentional. And it's almost hard to explain, right? It's something that it's like, you just know it when you feel it. And when you don't have it, it's almost just like this something in your mind and your heart and your soul just kind of switches off, where it's just like, okay, these people don't hear me. This might be something a little bit, what is the word? Like, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say. Just where they're wanting it to be something that's authentic, but they're just doing it for clout or to be labeled as progressive or woke. And a lot of
Performative, maybe.
Thank you. Yes. Extremely performative. And it's just like, I hate that you can tell that when it's happening. But it's also just like, it's kind of nice, right? That you have those sensors within you, within your heart and your mind, so that okay, like, these people are definitely not doing the work behind the scenes, and I feel that in my heart. And so I just think that an atmosphere that has been brave and safe, like, this is one of the first, right, spaces for me. It's multiracial, right? It's not all Black people. Like, those places affinity spaces are super important. And those are great for some people, right? But it doesn't have to be that way, right? And a lot of the times we don't have that opportunity and that privilege to be in spaces with only people of your race or color. And I honestly sometimes think that maybe those aren't so necessary, especially when we're working, living, coexisting in a world that is so blended, right? And so we're women-led, we're multiracial, we listen, right? Like, we're not only just giving, and it's like word vomit all the time, but we're also like taking time to listen. We're pausing in between sentences to like take it in. And I think ultimately, like, that is one of the best things. I know as women, maybe I should just speak for myself in this, but as an extrovert, I'm just like constantly the one talking all the time and taking up the space. And so when I'm in relationships with other people who are the same, I have a really hard time, because I'm just like, wait a second, you're not listening, And so one of my biggest takeaways from this project, and just like the idea of a brave space, is knowing that I need to work on my listening skills, because we're all so different, in that idea of introverts, extroverts, our lived experiences being so different, our backgrounds, but also holding value to that, to like the listening skill, because there's so much value in listening to each other. And I think a lot of the times everything's just moving so fast that we haven't really perfected the art of listening and being really intentional about hearing out someone who may not even be your friend or a perfect stranger. So, yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who joined a little late, so we're discussing right now what you think about when you hear the word brave space, and what an atmosphere would look like for you to be able to show up bravely and vulnerably. So if you want to, you can come on screen with us and chat with us. Otherwise, if you want to put some things into the chat of just what do you think of when you hear brave space? And if anyone else wants to share on camera, you can request as well.
Or even just audio is great too. Either Wendy or Erin, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what that term means to you?
I'm sure. I'll jump in, because I think I had not heard that term before I learned it from you, and following you all on social media and watching as this project came together. What I've really appreciated is just the joy and the lightness that you all bring to the work, and the ways that you express yourselves and talk about it. There's so many times when I enter into spaces where people are trying to talk about increasing representation, or working on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Which is a very corporatized phrase even now, and it's all kind of trauma based, right? It's all from this really heavy negative place of fixing some very real wrongs. Like, that at its heart is true. But what I've learned from all of you is that it can come from a place of love and vision, and a real hopefulness, and that you bring that to your relationships with each other and to the work. And so that has really helped inform me this year as I work in other communities as well. So I just have to say thank you for introducing the term and then showing how it can be done differently.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that a lot of this really did come about from kind of just imagining a new way. And, I think a year ago when we were having these conversations, we were in this space of pause. COVID happened, I got laid off. I was reimagining what everything could look like in our lives and in the world. And there was so much reckoning going on as a country around racial justice. And I think that because of being in that space, I know that Chelsea, really you did inspire me to look at things in a way of imagining, I don't know, just our relationship and our conversations were imagining how things could be and then working backwards from there of okay, we know things should be different. What in our perfect world situation would we want them to be like? And then let's work backwards from there. And I think that, like you said, Wendy, the stories of trauma and the history are so important. And that's a really big part of being in Brave Space is validating everyone's lived experience, but then also being able to be in a relationship where we are looking towards the future of how things can be, and then working to mend and heal together. And there are not really cut and dry answers of how to do that. And so that's why it's great to be able to have a conversation of how can you be in this space, your most full self, and how can I be in this space, my most full self? How can we build trust between each other? So I love that.
Yeah, I love that because it has this element of let's name the wound and then let's live the healing together, And I think that is really powerful when you can do that in solidarity with people and learn from each other what it means to live healing together.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, yeah. And so I think that what we kind of came up with as a team after all of these conversations and relationship building, we defined a brave space as a space to show up bravely, vulnerably, authentically, honoring all lived experiences and diving into real talk, even when it's hard, knowing we may not always say the right thing, but it was a space where we were committed to showing up with open hearts, open minds, and encouraging and challenging each other to listen, to learn, to heal, to grow, both individually and collectively. And yeah, Chelsea, if you want to talk a bit about storytelling, I think that's where we're going next.
I love that. I also just want to take one more second and invite, once again, anyone who just joined us, Amy, Keeley, you can jump on. I think in the top right, it says you can share your video and audio. In the very beginning, when we introduced ourselves, we just wanted this to be super collaborative. We just want to talk more about the idea of a brave space and storytelling, the importance of it all. And so wanting to hear from you guys as well. And so if you do want to do that, come on board. We are definitely wanting to see your faces. And it really doesn't matter, right? This is virtual. So if you're in your pajamas, if you have your coffee, whatever, this is a no judgment, super brave space. Okay. So just again, giving you that invitation. But I'm going to roll forward and talk about the importance of storytelling because this was a huge part of, again, this first little introduction to this film project. I just felt so confident within this project, hearing from other women, feeling validated and liberated through being in community, even though a lot of the time it was just virtually, which is a whole nother interesting thing in itself. We never really actually got to be together for the most part. We were all kind of all over the place, spread out. And so it's really kind of jaw-dropping to me that we were able to create such a brave space so quickly with a lot of these women via Zoom, which is cool. So a little bit of my story, and if you're born in the 90s, it was always like this once upon a time situation, right? And I just like want to take that and throw it all away, because there is no fairy tale in this, right? It's like Wendy mentioned, like it's a lot of like trauma and generational trauma that's been going on for years and years. And so a little bit of my story has not been none of my story has really been a fairy tale at all, but it's something that's worth sharing nonetheless. And it hasn't really been until this project, right, the end of 2019, when I began to hold space for my own story through my platform on Instagram and just in the communities that I was growing closer to. I started to give bits and pieces to who I was in a really public space on Instagram. And I know for a lot of people that's super terrifying and really hard to do, but I realized that so much of my story resonated with other people, right? And I began to feel less alone in the community, and the position as just one of the only Black women in my little town of Leavenworth, Washington, and normally the only Black woman in my outdoor circles and communities. So the platform connected me with Erin and Sanj and so many of the other women a part of the Brave Space Film Project. And as we began to dream up like the foundation behind the Brave Space Project, and I realized that there were other women out there doing some similar things to me, it was completely eye-opening, right? And just giving me more permission to tell my story. And I realized more and more how much my story and the untold stories of so many other women of color matter so much. As we were shooting and on production and filming, I realized that the power of storytelling and how other women really need to hear that their stories out in the world, right? So much of what, I'll speak for myself. I talk to myself a lot. And so I feel like a lot of my story happens like just in the quiet of just my own space. And it doesn't often get like put out into the world. And I feel like there's power in putting your story out in the world. And so storytelling through film and community, writing and engaging has really empowered me and so many other women to define their story, right? To continue to tell it boldly and to be proud of where you came from, and to be proud of where you're going. I think the community around building a brave space has really given me more confidence than anything that I've ever experienced before in my life. And I think so much of this once upon a time situation and the end, I have 2 daughters, and I tell a lot of like, I should really stop reading those books, but they're good at bedtime. We all do it. But it's like, there is no end to our stories, right? It's a journey, and our life is just something that is so beautifully woven. And I think that this film project, especially, and kind of having this community of other Black, Indigenous women of color, and white accomplices who are like on it with so many things, doing it for the better of our communities, I think has really been such a beautiful thing. And I think there's power in telling our stories. And I think there's still so many amazing stories out there that are just waiting to be told through the eyes and lenses of the communities and cultures that are intertwined in them. And I think a lot of that work, it's coming. And I think our little project, an Expedition Reclamation, is just one of many. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of maybe nudge you guys to talk a little bit more about storytelling and the importance of it. So yeah, just really speaking to the fact that we are all storytellers, right? And it's just so important. Kind of backing up a little bit too, Erin, do you want to talk about your position in this whole storytelling project? Because I think that with you being in the same town as me, and us kind of working this off the ground together, I think that there's maybe something that you want to share about anti-racism work and what it looks like to be a white accomplice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about how, the importance of, so as a storyteller and as a filmmaker, a photographer, we had conversations about the importance of having representation behind the lens and in front of it, and the importance of being able to hold space for all of these women, this multiracial team with all different lived experiences, different backgrounds. As a white woman, knowing that I wanted to show up to listen and to learn and also be a part of collective healing and my own healing in the space. And so I just think that I took it really seriously that there was work to be done before I could even show up to hold space for Black, Indigenous, or women of color. And just knowing that, there was a lot of learning and unlearning and reckoning that I had to do within myself and in my community. And I mean, I think some of the ways that I did that, a couple years ago, I got connected with a guidance counselor who has been an amazing person for me to process some of these things with. I mean, I think that there is guilt and shame that come with reckoning of our history as white people, and that's important to face. And it's not something that we should take to the BIPOC community to kind of like dump on all of you. That is something that we have to deal with within our own healing. And I am just a huge advocate for our own individual healing is collective healing. And so figuring out how to sit with grief of what has happened in the past while also being able to look to the future of how can I do better? How can I show up for communities in a way that is braver and more active? That's really important work to figure out in and of ourselves so that we can show up in these spaces and hold space. Showing up to hold space, I guess, is what I'm saying is like, you can't just do that overnight. It takes work. And I really appreciate being able to be in this space where, like we said about a brave space, it challenged me and encouraged me to do that work, my own healing, and figuring out what does it look like for me to be a part of your healing and our collective healing together. Yeah, if that makes sense.
That was beautiful.
Yes, I love that. And such important work, right? I think a lot of us have referred to that anti-racism work as work, now, because it is something that doesn't happen overnight, and it is not always easy. So definitely.
I love to think of it too as a practice. I think that it is work, but thinking of it as a practice is like, it is going to be a lifelong practice because we are ultimately each in our own stories. I will never know what it's like completely to walk in your shoes. You will never know what it's like to walk in mine. And so practicing, though, having empathy and learning more and asking questions and showing up and listening, truly listening, I think all of that is just, it's a practice. And I like to think about it that way too, because I am a perfectionist, and it reminds me that I will never be there. I will never be perfect. It will just be an ongoing conversation and ongoing practice.
I love that. Yeah, let's use that word. That's much better for sure. Because nobody really likes work. So I love that. That's much better. So just kind of scooting along and going back to the importance of storytelling, right? And understanding that each one of our stories matters, and we are all storytellers. Our vehicle for the film and the project Expedition Reclamation is the idea of a brave space and of storytelling through that lens. But we realize, it's applicable anywhere, right? I feel like I look back to the high school me, or the college me, where it was just like, I wish I had all of these tools that I have now, that I would have had them then. The idea of like, just what does confidence look like? What does it look like to be able to stand up in front of a class and speak boldly, about yourself, and not really ever having that space or that opportunity to do that. And so, Yeah, I just want to kind of run through a couple of questions, and this is where that interactive part comes into play here. So one of the questions is, are there ways that you've experienced the power of storytelling, right? The power of telling your story, the power of listening to someone else's story, right? We talked about the importance of listening, pausing, so that you actually get the opportunity to hear the story of someone maybe that's like you, and how that can be extremely validating when you're hearing the story of someone that might even be different from you. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and just kind of talk about the power of telling your story, or maybe that you've had like an interaction where it's been like the power of listening to someone else's story through a documentary or a good film or anything like that.
I can kick things off in sort of a more general sense. I think about this a lot in terms of the fact that we've deemed a certain field a creative field, or a certain job or profession a creative profession, or a storytelling profession. But in reality, creativity is a human quality and storytelling is a human practice. And from the dawn of time, the way that our species, Homo sapiens, have even connected with one another has been through storytelling. And so I think that when we think about the power of storytelling, it's really this way of metaphorically reaching your hand out to someone. And when someone listens, it's them reaching out and clasping your hand, and a connection is made. And so when you feel you can't tell your story because no one's listening, or because you're not empowered to do so for some other reason, or when you're not paying attention and listening to someone else's story, you're sort of precluding that potentiality for that kind of connection. But when you're someone who historically has felt like you can't share your story, and then you feel empowered to, I think that there's a certain spiritual click that happens when you realize that you have that ability to reach your hand out again, and someone will come and clasp it, So I think that when it comes to the power of storytelling, then it really is this way of building community and solidarity with each other. And when we think about our film, for example, or this movement in general to decolonize outdoor culture, or anything, to decolonize anything, I mean, the colonial project has really been to delegitimize the ways of life of groups of people around the world, and to make us feel isolated in our ways of thinking. So when we tap into storytelling, we're able to fight against that isolation and build community again, and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we are legitimate because we are able to tell our story. Someone is listening, someone had a similar story, and we listened, and that connection is back. And so that legitimacy and that community is back. And I think that heals a lot of the intentional divide and conquer mentality that really was exported along with imperialism. So I think that, that's kind of like a macro thing that I think a lot about, is across the world, that ability to storytell as human beings is just inherently healing for that reason. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has any like specific stories as well about how storytelling has been impactful for them. I think even like for me, to build off of that, with this project itself, it's been really cool because I grew up in a predominantly white town, and I didn't know that there were women that looked like me out in the outdoors. I was used to going outside with white men, and I think there was a big privilege to that, in that I was able to go outside and form that relationship with outdoor recreation. But there was always something a little bit off. I always felt stressed the night before, and they were always excited, and I never knew why. And then when I first went outdoors with women and women of color, that was really with you guys, Erin and Chelsea. Like, that was the first time I really did that. And I haven't gone with white men since, because I think there was such a sense of, it's like when you get a massage after a really long time and you didn't even realize how much tension you were holding. And so I think just like hearing your story, Chelsea, and seeing the work that you're doing, Erin, and hearing all the other women in our film talking about their experiences, I was like, I didn't even know that you guys were out here. I didn't know there was another way. And so I think when those stories are told and they come out from the realm of invisibility, you really just unlock so many more people's potential for themselves, you know?
I love that. And that like builds on so much about the idea of why representation matters, right? And like, I think that that is something that across the board, that's a human thing, right? Whether that is, you know, people who have been historically left out of representation. Hi. Thanks for coming. Yeah, so I think so much of why representation matters is because, you know, for Black, Indigenous, women of color, men of color, I just think that it's like we haven't historically seen ourselves in spaces like public lands and national parks and things like that. And it's just like, you know, when you start to see yourself doing things like mountaineering, represented in climbing, you're represented in running, being in the Olympics, being a gymnast, you know, you start to see yourself, it like does this thing in your body where you humanly just you can't unsee that, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like the potential here for me, like I could be a gymnast. Like Simone Biles has made me feel like I could be a gymnast. Although I know that I will never be a gymnast, in my head, mentally, I'm like, oh my goodness, this could be my life. And it's so amazing, right? You feel completely empowered by seeing people who look like you represented in the stories that are out there. And I think that ultimately, you know, a lot of us growing up historically not being represented, there's just so many feelings that come connected to storytelling. And so for a lot of us, it's still really hard to tell that story. We're holding them in and keeping them and telling them with only a handful of people, you know. And I think that there's power in that too, you know, having your tight circle of people who know how to make you feel seen and make you feel heard. You know, maybe they're constantly sending you pictures of really cool things or cool women or articles. And it's just like this tight knit situation, right? Like not everybody is meant to have a gigantic Instagram following. That is not healthy for one. And for two, it's just like, it's not everybody, right? That's not everybody's life. So I just think that it's so important that in this idea of storytelling, we also recognize the importance of representation. And then, yeah, I guess just moving along to some of the other big questions that were so good. We talk a lot about, you know, this reclaiming belonging, right? And a lot of it has to do with the outdoors because that's the circle that we kind of ride in, right? A lot of us do outdoor things, whether that's hiking or gardening, whether that's like taking walks in natural spaces. It really is not anything that is elite or eccentric, but we are really just getting outdoors because that is a place of healing for all of us. And I think that just kind of speaking to this reclaiming, right? And like we've also talked about behind the scenes, the word claim and how it kind of fits into that same category of like expedition, where it's like, it's a big word that colonizers have used in the past, right? When they're talking about land, it's like, we're claiming this land, we're sticking a flag in it, and now it's called Big Jim, you know? And it's just like these really interesting words that we're using, but we're taking them back and we are making them more productive in our healing. And I think that like storytelling and reclaiming our belonging is such a beautiful thing, and they go hand in hand. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump on and jump into the conversation about like what it means to reclaim your belonging to any place. That could be the outdoors, to your place at the table at work, in your church, in your family, at the Thanksgiving table. Like, what does it mean to reclaim your belonging in any space? Nobody? Nothing? Wendy, can I direct a question to you?
Sure.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I know it's interactive and it's hard, I know, when it's on Zoom. But yeah, just thinking of like a place. I know that you have been in circles, right, with women, with men, and just understanding, even for you, right, this idea of reclaiming belonging in a space. I don't know, maybe if it's something that you've done through your organization where you are opening up the doors for this to happen for other people, but maybe you can speak to that a little bit, or maybe it's in the works or your hopes and dreams for the future.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I have to say, I really was thinking storytelling. I have so many stories about, because my past career was in theater and opera. And so I was constantly around storytellers, and I helped facilitate those as a stage manager, right? I was the person who helped lay the stage for the storytellers to be able to step out and do their thing. But this question of belonging, it made me pause, because I have been pretty fortunate in not being challenged very often to say that I didn't belong, right? Even in, I mean, certainly in some gendered spaces where it was more typical to have boys or men in that space, you know, being one of two girls on the soccer team. But it was never that hard to be able to put my own flag down and say, I do belong here. So I acknowledge that as a rarity, right? Like I understand that's not typical. So I'll just say that. But to your question of then what's in my field of view to be able to make that more true for more people. And that's some of the work that I'm certainly doing through work, is trying to look at like, what are the assets, the gifts that we have to share and make them truly shareable. Like, how do we expand that out, but also listen to what people want and then shift and change our culture as an organization to be able to meet those needs. So those are the conversations that we're happily actively pursuing now, which is really great. I'm also part of the Feminist Bird Club chapter in Seattle, which has been a really different space, because it's a space that was created intentionally inclusive, right? It has a code of conduct that is set out that if that's a space that you're going to step into, it's a little bit like the brave space. Like, there's a definition for it. There's a way of being together, and that attracts different people into the circle. And again, it's a space where people can step into and feel the belonging, because it was there from the beginning. It's not being retrofit. It was intended to be there. So that's something I enjoy being part of and feeling that I do belong in.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And we are very grateful of your and who you are working with and how you're pushing the needle. I mean, we can't be in every space. Definitely. Sanj, do you want to talk a little bit about looking forward?
Yeah, sure. I think we've talked about this a little bit on our team. First of all, Wendy, I love everything you said. And when you said the Feminist Bird Club, I think is what you said, I was like, wait, are the birders the feminists, or are the birds the feminists in this bird club?
Yes. No.
But yeah, I think that looking ahead, one of the things we've talked about on this team, by Chelsea, is she'll be back, internet connection, I'm sure. But we've talked a bit about this idea that in an ideal world, something like our team, our approach, our project would be just sort of like, what do they say? It's like a I'm forgetting the phrase, but it would be almost like redundant, you know, like there would just be so many people working in this manner and so many projects out there that are telling stories or elevating stories of marginalized groups that this project, we had someone ask us once, you know, what are you guys doing that's different? And we were like, we don't know. And we hope nothing, you know, we hope that a lot of people are doing exactly what we're doing, because that would be the dream. And so I think looking ahead, when I think about storytelling and reclaiming belonging, just being in a world where everyone has access to that, and that is just the new mainstream, is a really exciting thought. Erin, I think you were going to say something in there too.
Yeah, well, you said something earlier, just talking about, you know, this idea of storytelling as, you know, when someone is telling their story, we have the opportunity then to reach out our hand and listen, and like then we are connected. And I just thought about how beautiful it would be if all storytelling was done that way, even in kind of our corporate world. You know, like we are in, I've been in journalism, we've done documentary filmmaking, and we've been on a lot of sets where it almost feels extractive, where people are going in just to get the story, and there isn't that reciprocal relationship of, I am actually here to get to know you and to do honor to your story by listening and then telling it in the most honoring way. And so I think that something that we talk about a lot on our team is this idea of moving at the speed of trust. And I think that that is something that we are doing differently. I know there are other teams, and it's actually been really beautiful. Recently, we've been in conversation with other teams who are saying the same thing. And we're like, we're speaking the same language. Other people are actually doing this as well, moving at the speed of trust. Although that might not be the norm, I think it's becoming more common. And like you're saying, I hope that it becomes just like second nature for everyone who is out there doing storytelling. And just the beauty of moving at the speed of trust is, you know, your project takes longer, but it also allows people to show up more bravely and maybe tell a part of their story that they never have told before, that then contributes to their healing in some way. Like, I think that when we are heard and legitimized, there is healing that happens. So I don't know. I really thought that was a really beautiful imagery that you created of the holding hands. And I'm so grateful to be on this team of women like you, Sanj, because I learn stuff every day where I'm like, that is a little bit different of something that we're doing that is just very natural, that isn't the norm. So,
well, it was you, Erin, that first said, you know, just because this is the way that other people have done it, or this is the formula for this particular kind of project or approach, or, you know, stage of a process, you're like, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that's how other people do it. How do we want to do it? And let's co-create that together. And that has been a really special thing. I feel like a lot of this project and a lot of this idea of a brave space is really taking many of the terms and the tropes that we hear a lot, like intentionality or mindfulness or slowing down or building relationships, all of these things, and being like, okay, we hear that phrase all the time. What does it actually mean? And what does it look like if we're actually practicing it? Because it's really easy to just make those things buzzwords and to just put them on a wall and be like, this is something we want to strive for. But then if you actually take those terms and you say, okay, in this moment, if I were to act without thought, then I would act in this way. But if I were to act intentionally, how would I act? And not being afraid to ask the question and then to actually follow up with exploring the answer. I think oftentimes we hear this idea, you know, people will say, okay, you don't like the way things are, but how else could they be? And asking that question rhetorically is such a bummer, because if you ask it genuinely, then you can actually figure out what the answer is. And what I've loved about this team is that we don't ask anything rhetorically. You know, we always say, okay, we, you know, short films, directors and producers don't often get paid for that. But we don't like that model because we put a lot of work into it, and we believe that work that is trying to help contribute to the healing, the collective healing, deserves to be valued, not just spiritually, but also monetarily. So how can we, what else can we do? How can we make it different? And instead of just being like, well, what else can we do? We're like, what else can we do? How can we make it different? And we found a way to make this film, and through crowdfunding and the community generosity and the community buy-in and sponsorship, to actually pay ourselves for that process, which has allowed us to sit with it this whole year and a half and give it the time it's asking for, because it's our literal job. And so I think that that's something I've learned from you, and that is just one great example of the way in which this collaborative team, where we're kind of making decisions together, is so transformational. Yeah.
And that co-creating in a space where we have talked about how representation matters. And so we have intentionally created a team that is of people from all different backgrounds, right? So we're coming at it from all different lived experiences and asking, like, what do you need in this space? And what do you need as a mother, to be on this project? And, I think that we're creating a space it's not, perfect in any means, but it is able to be more equitable in many ways, because everyone has an equal seat at the table. We are collaborators, co-decision makers, which I love. The other thing that as you're talking about, that we were able to pay ourselves for this project, that's one of the other terms that is kind of like this catchphrase, is this mindset of abundance, that we all kind of are like, what does that even mean? It's kind of like mindset of abundance. But we really explored, what does that look like for each of us as women in this industry, as mothers, as students, to be in this project and get paid for this work. And that has just been something that has been very empowering, realizing that the community will show up and the resources are there to be able to bring stories to light that do create healing in this world. So I love that.
Yeah. And if anyone has anything else to add, feel free to jump in there with it. But just in the interest of time, moving on kind of to the last section, we wanted to have a sort of closing discussion around some of these ideas, and really to start that off, reiterating this belief in the fact that everybody's story matters. And even if you're in a place right now where you feel like you don't have a brave space, or you aren't comfortable telling your story, how in your life can you take the first steps to creating this practice for yourself? So thinking about, in whatever situation you're in, maybe you already have access to the kind of energy that you would need to show up bravely, or maybe that's something that takes some effort to create. And if so, how can we think about doing that? So these are a lot of the questions that we asked ourselves when we were embarking on this project. We were learning to start the practice by asking those questions, and learning that the practice is really informed by asking those questions. And so some of those are, for example, where do you feel the least brave and why? What would it look like to transform that space into a brave one? Or where do you feel the most brave and why? So I don't know if anyone here in the chat, or Wendy on the screen, or Erin want to dig into that from whatever lands with you there. But I think that's a great way of sort of like thinking about how to put everything we've talked about into practice. I'm going to volunteer you, Erin, first, and then Wendy, if you have any thoughts after that.
All right. Yeah, I think where I feel the least brave and why is just in a space where I feel really out of my element. I mean, I think that a specific example for me is as a filmmaker in Eastern Washington in a rural space, I am often the only woman on set with a camera, with doing anything technical. And there tends to be some mansplaining going on about, assuming that I don't know how to work my gear, and then I start to question myself and be like, do I know how to work my gear? Do I know what I'm doing? And so I think that's one of the spaces that I probably feel the least brave, is just in a space where somebody is maybe assuming that I don't know what I'm doing. And it kind of sends the message that maybe I don't belong in that work or in that space, even though I feel that I do. And I think that at least for me, in the past year, one of the beauties of this project, I had never worked on a project before with all women on a creative team. And that was a really cool experience, just to be able to know that I could show up and express myself in whatever way I needed to, that emotions were welcome, that asking questions was welcome, that we were all peers and there wasn't some sort of weird power dynamic of this person is making the decision. And a space where I feel the most brave, in a space where I'm allowed to ask questions and I think ultimately show up with all of my emotions, because I have a lot of emotions and I've often been in workspaces where that's not allowed. You leave everything at the door. And so being able to show up and just be like, guys, I'm having a tough day today. So if I have resting grumpy face, it's not you, it's just that I'm tired, and being able to show up and communicate that and having that just accepted has been a beautiful space for me to learn and grow and really come into myself in my work, in leadership, and in storytelling.
I love that. I think also, to go back to a point you'd made earlier, Wendy, part of what I love about this team and what makes it feel like a brave space to me is our constant desire to laugh. We're like always laughing, and even on the hardest days, one of us can say something and everyone will just bust out laughing. And I think there's something so brave about taking whatever the situation might be and finding joy and humor in it, because that's when you're really triumphant over whatever that hardship is when in the face of it, you can still find that joy. And so what I love about this team is I think there's so much bravery in that, being like, I'm tired today, I'm feeling a little bit grumpy. And then like 15 minutes later, we're all cracking up, And so I think it doesn't make the tiredness or the grumpiness go away, but it's something that kind of helps fill the cup a little bit. And we talked a lot about, we've always talked about this, where if we're having a hard morning, just coming on to our weekly meetings and seeing each other's faces, suddenly there's just like a sense of levity and a sense of love and a sense of like, today was rough, but I can't take it too seriously, because like, look at these beautiful people in front of me who care about me, and really building that care into a professional space and recognizing that care and the expression of care is valued in the workplace. So I think that is something that, to build off of your point just now, Erin, too, has been very cool. Chelsea, welcome back. To fill you in, we're talking a bit about when we feel the least brave and why, and how we can transform a space into a brave one, and then maybe thinking about when we feel the most brave and why, or anything that kind of jumps off from those ideas. I don't know if you have any thoughts, or Wendy, if you had any thoughts, but open floor for anyone.
I'll just pause for Chelsea. She may not be able to come back on camera yet.
Yeah, maybe not. Go for it.
Erin, a little bit kind of like you, I'm feeling very grateful for these last couple of years with Seattle Audubon, because I feel like they, particularly in the last 2 years, with the current staff that we have, there is a lot of that. I will say our Zoom calls aren't quite as joyful, I think, sometimes, but I think that's part of the current nonprofit model not being so supportive. It's not the organization's structure, it's the structure of how nonprofits are funded and paid for. And it produces a level of stress that we're not able to step out of because we're rooted in that. So that's pretty challenging. But as individuals, we really like each other and support each other, and there's a lot of that. So that's super cool. So I feel like that has given me space to be brave and to particularly be able to talk about anti-racism as an organization and the things that we're trying to move that our little slice of the birding community in Seattle, right? Like it's a little tiny slice of people, but we're trying to be action oriented and, changing the culture and putting ourselves out there. But what I am noticing and what I'm working on carrying with me and acknowledging is that I get to put on that cape, that cape that has the Audubon logo on it, that gives me some protection when I'm talking about anti-racism and when I'm talking about equity and inclusion, because I have this authority when I have my name tag on. And when I am just me and I'm talking to a group of friends or a group of people I may not know as well, and I hear something or something happens, that's when it counts, right? That's when I have to be brave on my own. And that's where the practice comes in. That's where not relying on just being I'm going to air quote it big time, good person doesn't work, right? It's the practice. It's actually being brave in the moment. So I just have to acknowledge that. I don't get to wear my work protection all the time.
Yeah, that's so well said, and just such an insightful way of sort of knowing your power in certain spaces, and also the ways in which you have to be more intentional about harnessing that power in other spaces. Just in the interest of time, that's a great note, I think, to sort of conclude on, because it kind of leads to the question that we would just love to leave you all with, which is, how can you, moving forward, think about the intentionality around creating brave space in your communities and your relationships? So doing exactly what you just said, Wendy, and kind of figuring out in each situation, what role do you play and how can you play that role bravely and in a way that brings some of this practice into the forefront of how you show up, and leading with that sense of leading with example. So thank you all so much for being here today. I hope that it was a generative couple, or how long was it? Hour-ish for everyone. We could talk about this stuff all day. Erin and Chelsea, I don't know if you guys have any closing words as well, but we are super happy to be in community with you all, and if you would, we can drop our contact information in the chat as well. You can follow us and our work at bravespaceproject.org and find all of us individually from the team page on that website as well, if you'd like to follow along.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's being recorded on here, so maybe I can just read Chelsea's comment if it's just audio, because her audio is not working right now. But she said something really beautiful here. She said, she wanted to add that when you find community that empowers you to be brave, you naturally want to see that in every other relationship in your life. Boundaries become more clear, then you can implement them. And when you feel brave, it's like a movement. You pass it on to others, and so on and so on. And I think that's just a beautiful sentiment to end on. Thank you, Chelsea.
I love that. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you all so much. This has been such a privilege for us to get to chat through and reflect on some of the things that we've been learning and share that with you and hear how it lands with you and all the things that you all have been up to. So thank you, especially Wendy, for being on screen with us. It's been such a pleasure to hang out with you this afternoon.
Same. Great to see you all. Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah. And thank you so much to Siobhan and the Refuge team as well. We're so grateful to be a part of this.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye. Bye,
Everyone.
Chelsea.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
She's back.
I got to listen in on a bit of it. it won't record the chat when we go to repost it, but we'll make sure to do a slide or something so that your contact information is in at the end. So we'll make sure to do that. And if the video is choppy, because it sort of looks choppy at some point, I may ask if we could get that as something that I can download and drop in there as well. I do a lot of our editing, me and Kamari. So iMovie, that's it. I've learned a lot. So simple edits. So probably I'm going to take Monday and Tuesday off. So it might be for a while before we post it, but I'm hoping to start posting things in probably about 2 weeks or so. But we're trying to develop a sharing plan. So before we start doing all of that. But thank you. What I heard was awesome. So I can't wait to go back and listen to the whole thing and watch the movie tomorrow.
Yeah.
How are you all feeling?
Good. I think probably similarly to you, where we're, it's been a whirlwind last couple months. And so we're happy to be taking a break next week.
Are you all?
Okay.
Yeah. We got really great feedback that was super helpful for the edit. And we kind of really were pushing to get that screening deadline. So now we're taking like a week and a half off to just breathe and rest and deal with some other things. So.
Yeah. We're taking the month from December 1st through January 5th off as a team.
Good.
Because we've just been going so hard and so long since the pandemic started. So we're gonna slow it down. But yeah, I'm so excited, and yeah, let's stay in touch. I want to talk about next year, and also I want to still hear when you all are going to show the full film. All of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe in October or so we'll jump on I'll reach out and maybe get a call scheduled so we can talk more.
Yeah,
we already have I gotta go change the script. This reminds me. We're gonna announce our festival for next year today, but the county did not give me the contract, so I refuse to announce until they get me that contract.
Yeah.
But hopefully by October, it was supposed to be to me this last week, and then this week, and it still hasn't happened. So hopefully by October we'll have it signed. But I would love to see how to get you all in person and maybe screen there since it'll be out more readily available. We've been doing movie nights as part of Refuge for the last year. We had a movie night last night where we showed 3 films. 3 shorts. We like to do shorts. Our attention now is real short. So anything, because I think yours is going to be less than 30, right?
Now it's going to be a little bit longer, but not too much longer. It's going to be 45 about, and that's just because, but it's very well paced. So I think it kind of flies by. If we say so ourselves.
If you were going to say an hour and a half or 2 hours, I would have been like, so let's figure something else out. But 45.
Turned it into a trilogy. It's going to be 2 hours each.
It's 12 hours long. It's an art film. So we do expect everyone to stay for the full 12 hours. No bio breaks will be allowed.
I do not do art films anymore. I have a very bad story from Argentina, going to the film festival and seeing some stuff I never want to see, and it's burned into my memory and it's very bad. It's very, very bad. I was just telling a friend about it, and he was like, "Oh, okay." Those that was just like, I don't tell many people the specifics about that movie because it was that bad.
My imagination's running wild.
I'm going to let it just run wild because it is not as bad as what this movie actually was, because you will not believe what this movie was. It just,
wow.
And it was almost 2 hours. And I was just like, please get me out of this movie.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a whole ordeal. But yeah, I would just love to catch up too and see what else y'all are up to. So I'm excited about that. And I'll keep you posted on this. Once I watch it and see what edits need to happen, I might come back with some more questions or asks.
Yeah. That sounds so great. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for inviting us to be a part of this space. It's really been such a joy.
Good. Oh, awesome. I'm so happy that you all enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
And Wendy is a rock star, so I'm glad she came on screen and shared as well.
We love Wendy.
Yeah. Did you all just meet her today? Or
No,
did
we
you?
know her from before. The Seattle Audubon is one of the sponsors of our film. So we've actually collaborated with her on some things. So that was really fun to see her.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I didn't. Wendy's just out here. That's why I put it. I didn't even know that part. And I was like, Wendy's a rock star. Now she's an even bigger rock star. I had no idea. Oh, that's
so
so
cool.
Yay.
All right. Well, thank you again. Good luck with the rest of the festival too.
Thank you. Much appreciation. Have a good day, ladies.
You too. Bye.
Bye.